That is the rebound effect. As I said, you can use this concept for energy, you can use it for other resources such as minerals or other natural resources, you can use it for area, just to name a few examples. What is interesting about the rebound effect and why are we looking at it? We are looking at it during a project which is called Recap. It has a pretty long name, you can read right here. It's basically about modeling and then capping those rebound effects we found. We are doing that in a 3-year project for the Federal Ministry of Education and Research of the German government, and we are about halfway through this 3-year project, so everything I'm telling you right now is work in progress. The work that has been done already was mostly done by our partners, which is the Institute of Ecological Economics in Berlin and the Chair of Statistics of the University of Göttingen, from which we hope we can use econometric findings to improve our modeling. The project on our side is worked by Lara and Markus, Lara Ahmann and Markus Flaute, which you might have met last year at this conference, as well as Lutz, our director. So the question, why are we looking at the rebound effect? The underlying, let's call it a problem, is that energy consumption is not decreasing as fast as hoped or maybe as fast as expected. And the question is, does the rebound effect or several rebound effects have a significant contribution to that? And if that's the case, what drives this rebound? And ultimately, can we somehow factor it in our models, or are they maybe factored in already? To give you an illustration about this problem, so to speak, we have here the primary energy consumption of Germany, which you can see has a slight development in recent years, but there's really not too much going on, while the aim, especially in 2050, is quite ambitious. So in 2020 already there should be a 20% decrease compared to 1990, and in 2050 the decrease is expected to be 50%. Now, what, let's just say, some people are proclaiming is that if we have a 50% increase in energy efficiency, everything is fine, because then we'll only need half the energy, and so energy consumption goes down by 50%. We might see that that is not necessarily the case. As I already said, the term rebound effect means basically a concept, and there are several rebound effects. I'm not going into too much detail here. What to take away from this slide is basically the rebound effect operates on different levels. This is an, so to speak, updated taxonomy by our colleagues from the Economics in Berlin as output of this project. You can see that there is basically this micro level where several rebound effects take place, mostly regarding firms and households. The literature differentiates between direct and indirect rebound effects, which are mostly due to an income effect. So if energy efficiency increases, energy gets cheaper, I can buy either more energy or energy consuming processes, or I can buy other products or processes because my real income kind of increased. And what we are trying to capture is basically the area above that. So we are not looking at individual firms or households because our model is kind of limited in that way, but we hope to get an understanding of the sector level, which is here called meso level, and we hope that we can also make an estimation about the national effects, which would be a kind of a macroeconomic rebound effect, while we are aware that international effects are kind of hard to capture with a national model, which Panta Rhei is. So we are kind of trying to capture that by exports, but we are aware that that is kind of limited. Let's have a quick look at what others have done before us. There are many studies dealing with rebound effects, although there are not really many models in the way that we are talking about models, so macroeconomic or CGE models. They are mostly econometric models that have this one equation where they are trying to estimate the rebound effect. For exceptions are listed here. We have looked at those in detail to see how they are capturing the rebound effect in their models and what might be the channel that the rebound effect is basically working. I'll come to that later on. Mostly they are CGEs. Two of those examples are here, one a national, one an international model. The model that is certainly closest to ours is the one by Barker et al., which is a macroeconometric model. You can see the range of the rebound effects are quite a range. So in other models there are actually figures that go above 70%. Some, although many theoretical, say that the rebound effect might even be higher than 100%, so then called backfire. That was one of the arguments when this term first came up, that basically because resource gets cheaper it might be used more, and then we have this backfire effect. Now coming to Panta Rhei and how we are actually modeling it. Just as a quick overview what Panta Rhei actually is, I think most of you at least heard the name or are more or less familiar with it. It's an Inforum type model, it's built bottom up, uses a lot of official statistics, and the core of the model is basically the Inforum model, which you might have heard. And Panta Rhei adds certain modules to it, most importantly the energy module, so to speak, which is of course pretty important when we are looking at the rebound effect and how it connects with energy efficiency. Of course, when we are doing calculations with Panta Rhei, we are mostly looking at different scenarios, so that is what I'll be talking about next. We don't really have this baseline scenario because in our baseline scenario something's already happening, and that is an autonomous increase in energy efficiency. This autonomous increase kind of comes out of blue sky, out of heaven. It's an assumption made by most of the papers we have looked in, and of course makes many things very easy, but we might run into some problems there. To give you an explicit idea how it is modeled, we have this 10% increase in manufacturing, so we have energy variable, the final energy demand, which is a vector split between different sectors, and we are now saying that basically in all the manufacturing sectors there's this 10% increase in efficiency, which means there's 10% less final energy needed. And we give this into the model by a basic fix from 2021 onwards. This is the basic channel it operates. I think most of it is, as you might call it, economics 101. So we have at first this decrease in energy demand in this specific industry or multiple industries, as it is the case right here. Then, of course, the production costs in this industry also decrease, which, at least in the case of competition, enables the prices to go down as well, which, of course, leads to increasing demand, and from that follows an increase in production, employment, and investment. And this channel, which should be true for the industry where the efficiency gain takes place, is true, should also be true for other industries that are then using the now cheaper input as an intermediate input themselves. Of course, the chain does not end here, but it iterates. I think the idea should be clear. So this is our basic scenario, if you want to call it. from which we found out that it might not be enough. I come to that later on. So we tried some other scenarios where we made some further assumptions. One is that the electricity price is actually highly affected by this decreasing demand. Arguably, if you're looking at energy, there are most of the resources, the price is determined at the international level. So, for example, the oil price won't really change if Germany consumes less oil. That's not how it works, or at least we suspect it that way. It might be a different case for electricity. So in this scenario, and this is where we are forced to make another fix, we assume that the price of electricity goes down, at least for the households, by 1 cent per kilowatt hour, also from 2021 onwards. It might be a drastic change. The actual price is, I think, this is just the, how to say it, wholesale components and taxes and everything is added on top of that. By now it's like, I think 6 cents, and then it goes down to 5, but the overall price for electricity changes from about 30 cents to 29 or that. And again, only affects households. This is actually part where we are hoping from our colleagues in the University of Göttingen to get us some empirical findings and to actually get a realistic effect, because our model does not have a, let's say, electricity market where the price would be modeled. We are kind of dependent on that. Then another assumption we are adding in the scenario is that now the consumption of the households due to their increased real income actually goes up. So in the first scenario we basically found out that, of course, spending or savings also increase, so spending doesn't increase as much as, let's say, we hope for, or at least other models show that it might. So we are, how to call it, let's say just we are using this hypothetical real income gain, and artificially, that's the word I was looking for, increase the spending of the households, again with a vector that captures the final consumption of households in real terms. Then we are actually, we step back from this hypothesis that this efficiency gain comes out of thin air and say that there's an investment needed to get this energy efficiency increase. There's a study we could use to just get a rough number of 25 billion. All this investment, at least in the case it is right now, occurs completely in 2021. So it's a one-time investment and no further spending is needed in the point after that. Again, there's a vector that captured that actually too. So there's one equipment component and another one which is pretty significant is building investment. Last but not least, we have a scenario, or I should say a rough scenario outline regarding the export elasticity. So implicitly in our model, the export or price elasticity of exports is basically 1. With other publications, citing is as a value of 5. We thought it might be an idea to try that. So again, we modify the export vector here. As a broad suggestion where those fixes are entering the model, you have a schematic overview here. Prices, because we thought they don't really fit into this kind of depiction, are left out. But you can say that you can see that the first scenario, of course, affects the input structure, and all the other are here in basically the second quadrant on the right hand side. Let's have a look at the results, which I think are kind of interesting. First of all, we use this equation to calculate our rebound effect. So we have this delta in energy efficiency consumption, which we first have in the initial fix. So the fix we are basically giving exogenously into the model is a fix that decreases the absolute number of energy used. And after calculating the scenario, we get another absolute number of the energy that was actually saved or not saved. If we divide those two by each other and subtract it from 1, we get the rebound effect I showed you on one of the first slides. So what can we see here? Important is that each of those bars cumulates the ones before it. So in other words, scenario 5 includes scenario 1 to 4 plus 5 itself. What's definitely interesting is that in the first scenario nothing is really happening, which might be because there's a link missing in the model, or what we are also suspecting is that the effects are just so small. If a company has, let's say, 2 to 5% costs due to the spending of energy or energy in their processes, and those costs decrease by 10%, then yeah, of course the effect is only 0.5% or something like that, which might be neglectable. What you can also see, and I'll switch to another depiction here, which is basically just the difference from the slide before, is that as soon as we are touching the electricity price, the effect gets pretty significant, or at least compared to what we had before. So this electricity price reduction seems to be pretty important, and in two regards. So on the one hand, it is important that the model kind of captures it, and of course it is important that we are getting a good idea of what is the actual level of change that we can expect from here, because if we tune that one wrong, it might lead to very strange results. What you can also see is this rise in private consumption doesn't really have a huge effect, so we might just let this one out in our final calibration. You can also see, but unsurprisingly, as I think, that the investment has a huge effect in the actual year it occurs, and then of course decreases over time and actually leads to a, if you want to call it, negative rebound effect at the end of the period. The increase in exports has also a positive effect, as you might have suspected, although it is relatively small in the beginning, which has a much higher impact later on. So what can we actually take from that? All the results right now are basically at the beginning of our process, so we are now actually just starting modeling the rebound effect and are trying to get an idea of what are the channels that might be important and might not. One very important channel is of course the electricity price, which is not surprising given that in most of the literature we scan, so to say, the price elasticity is the one thing everything comes down to, especially the CGEs. The question is, of course, is this the way to go with our model too? Then I should add, and I'm coming to the outlook right now already, that modeling the rebound effect is actually only part of our project. So and I think that most important, or at least very difficult part, is to actually cap this rebound effect. So find policies that are less prone to rebound effects, although always keeping in mind that the rebound effect itself isn't really bad. So there is basically a welfare improvement due to the rebound effect, and each individual wouldn't act the way it does if it wasn't beneficial to it. We are, as I said, hoping for input from our colleagues. And of course, what we just started is this sensitivity analysis where we are tuning those different parameters and try to evaluate their impact. As I said, the policies are then the next big thing to come. And there are basically just a few, if you want to call it instruments, that are established in the literature or are kind of the ones to choose from, and they are pretty much the obvious ones. So you always have taxes, you always have caps, and then there are some, what should I call them, less hard instruments where you're trying to influence the consumer behavior and something like that. Try to get people sensitive for the problem, but they are really hard to model, at least with the tools we are using. Just to add this at the end, we are not modeling this just by ourselves, so there's a constant communication with stakeholders as well as experts that were able to give us insights. Expert means other economists we were able to get into contact with who already researched the rebound effect, and stakeholders come from German government officials, if you want to say so, as well as industry participants. Yeah, I hope that gave you a broad overview of the rebound effect. If you have any input, especially as regards to changes we might be overlooking or ideas to modify Panta Rhei, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, questions, comments? Doug.
Yeah, I'd be glad to make a few comments. We did a lot of work on this topic about 6 years ago. We were studying some of the climate change proposals that were then okay to talk about in the USA. And we got quite different results, and I want to kind of bring out why I think we did. So on the rebound effect, you distinguish between the micro, the household level, and then the more macro. It's a very important idea. So for the micro, our model has a system of consumption equations. So the overall budget is determined, by the disposable income, and there's some savings taken out. And basically what's remaining is the consumption. So if the energy efficiency increases and the household can consume less gasoline or less electricity or natural gas, they now have more income to spend on other goods. So this shows up directly in our consumption equation, and it's probably the most important part that we found was the consumer-driven effect. Our trade effect was much smaller, but we didn't assume any elasticities quite so high as what you had. Maybe I'd say, we estimate ours econometrically. So we're finding between 1 and 2, roughly that range of price elasticity, although we use the BTM a lot, so it'll have a different elasticity kind of determined by the international system, which is an interesting question all of its own. The other thing I thought was interesting was you mentioned this electricity price response. We talked a lot about this, and we talked about this, what if the demand goes down, what happens to the electricity producers? Does the price go down, or do some of them just stop producing? Because there's two different things that can happen. If the price goes down by very much, you might say, unless they already have a lot of excess profit, they can't afford to produce anymore. Maybe their cost is such that they can't produce electricity. So then you get some producers leaving the market, which then reduces the supply, and so you won't have such a price effect. But we weren't able to decide about this because our model didn't tell us. We had to make an assumption about this problem. But our distribution was quite different. But I'd say we still came out about 30 or 40% was our area that we were getting.
Yeah, thank you. Very good points you're raising. I think especially the last one, I'd be interested if you find any solution, because we found out that our model there is quite limited as well. So if we had a specific electricity market model or something like that, we might be one step further, but at the moment we just can't do it. Where, as I said, we are kind of pushing the work to the University of Göttingen to give us an idea. With regards to the first point you raised, I think it's captured this pretty well. I had discussions with my colleagues. I think in our case, the model is basically there's demand for good X, Y, and so on, and the effect because of the real income is not as high in this case. But yeah, it might be a screw to turn and modify. So thank you.
Marcelo, please.
Yeah, I had some points, some questions of clarifications of your scenarios for the lower price of electricity. Is that only for household consumption or household use of electricity, yes, or also for firms?
No, in this case it's just for the households.
Okay, so you had this effect that he's talking about. I mean, do you have that effect that you see here on the rebound effect due to change in consumption also in general, which is, I don't know how is this distinguished from the other scenario that you have, the third one, where you have higher private consumption. Isn't that endogenous in the model as I thought, yes, it was working? I thought it was not exogenous but endogenous to the model.
Yes, you are right. It is endogenous. The difference between basically this and this one is that here the assumption is that the savings rate kind of stays the same.
Right.
So the consumption does not go only up by this amount in this scenario, but also additional to that a little further. But the impact was limited. Yeah.
Okay. And my last question is about the last scenario on exports. Do you have that change in the elasticity the same for all sectors?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
Can you quickly go back to your first picture? That one. It's nothing to do with your base of your model. But you know what happened in my country is you will also see that type of thing. And that is only the change of sectors over time. Meaning in South Africa, for instance, we had a lot of gold. One gold mine will use the same electricity as Sochi. So if you haven't got gold anymore, you will have less. So if you present a thing like this, I think it's always good to take that into account, the change of your economic structure, because some sectors use more, more electricity than others.
Thank you.
And the last question, Andrei Kolpakov.
Have you considered the case of motor fuel consumption, increase in efficiency of motor fuel consumption? And well, actually the question is, if I want to model the transport sector, so what is the typical level of rebound effect in transport sector I should always keep in mind by modeling?
Tough question, because we haven't really looked at motor fuel or something like that right now. I mean, there is a quite a range of literature on it, because I think it's very intuitive that if you say, okay, the price of gasoline goes down, then of course you drive more, and there you have the rebound effect. But to give you an exact number, I think I can look it up and come back to you, but